One of the questions I get asked the most in the comments to my astro vlogs is, how do you focus on the stars? How do you focus at night in the dark? Well, I'm going to show you the one method that I use most of the time, as well as 5 other methods. And yeah, that is the Milky Way up there. So the first method is daytime focusing. Some people actually like to go out in the daytime before it gets dark, focus their lens on maybe a distant mountain or something close to the horizon, and then lock that down with a bit of masking tape or gaffer tape. And then when night falls, they know they're already focused at infinity and they can begin shooting. Personally, I find this very impractical because you have to go out before it gets dark, which sometimes isn't, the case. You might want to go out 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and you might not have time to get out before dark and focus. So number 2 is my personal favorite, and that is live view focusing. So bring up live view on the back of the camera. Make sure your settings are already dialed in because your camera will try to amplify the scene. And also make sure that your lens is already pretty close to infinity. Those 2 tips will help you find a bright star or a planet on the live view on the rear LCD. If you're struggling to find a bright star or a planet, you may be able to use a distant street light or a distant town. Any point source of light that's kind of at least 50 meters away will get you to a good point. You may also want to use the masking tape trick with this method, and I especially like to lock the focus down if I'm doing a big panorama of the Milky Way and I'm moving the camera. There's a chance I may knock the focus ring. So I like to lock the focus ring down with a bit of masking tape. And that way I know all of my shots are going to be in focus. There's nothing worse than going home with a bunch of out of focus shots, because there's nothing you can do to fix it in post-production. Number 3 is hyperfocal distance focusing. Now the hyperfocal distance is the distance at which to focus such that everything from infinity to half of the hyperfocal distance towards you is in what's known as acceptable focus. Acceptable focus is based on something called the circle of confusion. I'm not going to go into that in great detail right now, but I'll leave a link below to a PhotoPills article that explains it very well. But this is the reason that a lot of hyperfocal distance tables differ on the internet. The hyperfocal distance completely depends on the focal length of the lens you are shooting at, as well as the aperture setting you are using. I can personally recommend the tables within the PhotoPills app, and then once you've found the hyperfocal distance for your lens, focal length and aperture, you have to try and guesstimate how far into the scene that is, or you can maybe bring a tape measure with you and actually measure the hyperfocal distance. But the one bit of advice I'll give you is to focus past the hyperfocal distance a little bit. If you focus closer than the hyperfocal distance, then infinity focus will drop off very quickly. So make sure to focus a little bit further than you think the hyperfocal distance is, and you should be okay. Number 4 is focus stacking. Now in landscape astrophotography, when you're shooting at night, you're typically using very wide apertures, typically f2.8, somewhere around there. That means that your depth of field is going to be very thin. So if you find yourself close to your foreground subject, you're going to need to employ a bit of focus stacking in order to get the image sharp all the way through. What I tend to do is first take a shot focused on the stars, and then I'll review the image and find the point at which focus is starting to drop off. And then using a head torch, I will light the scene and I will focus at that point where the focus was dropping off. And I'll keep doing that until I'm all the way up until the foreground. Then you can take those images, throw them into Photoshop and stack them very easily. I'm not going to show you that now because there are plenty of videos on YouTube already, but it's a very easy process. Number 5 is to use a Bartinov mask. Now this is named after the amateur Russian astronomer Pavel Bartinov, who invented this grid pattern of 3 slits at different directions. And this causes diffraction spikes on point sources of light when placed in front of the lens. The idea is to just get all the lines to cross the middle of the star, and that's when you know you're in perfect focus. If you are going to use them with a wide angle lens, you won't be able to see the diffraction spikes on live view. You will have to take a test shot and adjust, take another test shot and adjust until you get that critical focus. And I find that these Bartinov masks work a lot better for longer focal lengths, from 50mm up. Getting critical focus with wide angle lenses is a lot easier, but when you start using lenses 50mm, 70mm, 135, focus becomes a lot more critical and a lot more difficult to achieve. That's where you may want to start thinking about a Bartinov mask. Lastly then, number 6 is autofocus. Now this completely depends on your camera's low light capability, but if the moon is out, you should be able to autofocus your lens if your lens has autofocus. My Samyang lens doesn't have autofocus.
Now, I can't speak for other brands, but I've had some luck with my Sony bodies autofocusing on bright planets like Venus and Jupiter, and also bright stars like Sirius and Arcturus, but it's not a method I would recommend.
And that is it, guys. I hope you have found this video useful. If you have any questions, feel free to get in the comments below. If you have a method or a technique which I've missed out, please get in the comments below or get in touch and let me know. And yeah, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're going out to enjoy the night sky anytime, I wish you good luck and clear skies.